through this together as an organization, and that's what we're trying to do at the Meadowlands, and my chamber colleagues that might be on the call as well. That's what all of our types of organizations are trying to do, just pull everybody along together, and together we're stronger. Information is power. You must have information. You must spend time reading and understanding. If you're a business, where is the support for you from government, and where is your consultants, your accountants, your CPAs, your advisors? Pull those teams together. Think creatively about how to strengthen your organization, and do it in chunks of time. I'm planning on how I'm running the chamber for the next 2 to 3 months. And during that time, I'm going to plan on what the next 3 months will look like. And then we could get to what does 2021 look like. And so that's what I'm doing at the chamber. And hopefully Paul's going to share some tactics for you about how to think about the nonprofit world. We will continue to put out as much accurate information as possible. Joe Garavente has done an outstanding job of our curated business resource page, which has updated links all the time. If you need to review it, please take a look at it. There's a lot there, I understand, but take the time to click on some links, see what the government has put out, see what the Department of Labor has put out, see what nj.gov has put out for the coronavirus situation. There's lots of good information there. And then through other business learning, we're going to continue to act as if we're producing events that you could attend, only we're going to do it like this. And through the communications of an event like this, virtual, and what we do in print and digital publications, we'll continue to pass along information that's hopefully going to allow you to make better business decisions about how you run your organizations. And so you have my undying commitment to make sure we continue to do that on your behalf. And I can only thank you for your participation. But more importantly, I thank you for your leadership and what you do in each one of your organizations. You all make us a better place. And so Jeff and your team that's leading this committee, thank you. Joe as the liaison, and to all of you, and certainly our friends at D'Alessandro for putting this on today. Feel free to communicate with me at any time, and feel free to use the COVID-19 help at meadowlands.org email hotline for anything. That goes directly to me. It's confidential, and I will use that information of your request or of your need and help steer you in whatever the right direction is to help in any way. And I'm going to just say one last thing, Jeffrey. I'm sorry I'm taking more time than I wanted to, but I want to say to you something that's really important. If anyone is experiencing difficulty emotionally with dealing with this, do not push that aside. Seek help, okay? Seek help. This is an emotional roller coaster for all of us, including me. I have good days and I have not good days, as this virus is touching all of us, friends and family, and it's the same way for me as well. So I can tell you, if you need to reach out, don't hesitate. The alternatives are not good. And so don't be afraid. Have the courage to talk with someone. And if someone close to you needs that help, ask them to have the courage to seek that help as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Paul and his team. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Jim. As always, very important and poignant words from you there. That's really good advice for everybody. And we appreciate everything the Chamber's doing, particularly for the nonprofits throughout this time. I want to introduce next Arthur Bassani from In Time Catering. It's really a testament that during this time we're getting sponsors for these events, and that businesses are showing commitments to the Chamber and to the nonprofits, and recognize the importance of still getting their message out there. So we definitely want to thank our sponsor this morning, In Time Catering, and give AJ a couple of minutes to say something. Can't hear you, AJ.
Yeah, unmute. Yeah, unmute yourself, AJ. AJ, scroll down the bottom of the screen. On the lower left side, there should be a microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all for having me this morning. We're in we're in unprecedented times, right? I've been in business for over about 25 years. And before this, we've never laid anyone off because of lack of work. And when this started, we laid off 85% of our team. We were fortunate. We all need to kind of pivot and do things differently and think differently and be creative. We're all entrepreneurs, right? You guys are running your business. Running a nonprofit is running a business. And we went from doing $100,000 galas to feeding patients and support staff for the field medical hospitals at the few exhibition centers in Secaucus and Edison, New Jersey. I want to try to speak to as many people as I can to learn and understand. We do, most of our business, I should have started, we are a full service off-premise catering company. We are 80% corporate, nonprofit. Our biggest clients are in healthcare, and we've seen, obviously, all of us, very few, I don't know of any businesses that have not been unscathed by by this pandemic. So we're currently working with some nonprofits to try to think about how they're going to reinvent, or how we're going to do galas or virtual galas, and not knowing what is going to be allowed at this point in time, or in this year or the future. So we're thinking about how do we transition from doing large galas to doing smaller events, to reinvent fundraising. When we say virtual gala, does that mean, we've thrown around ideas like, people still buy a table, but it's a table in your local restaurant to help support, the local restaurants who have been decimated by this. Is it, your main constituents? Typically, nonprofits are driven by each of you are driven by specific industries, and people within that industries, do they host galas in their home for 40 people, and do a virtual gala that way? So just ideas that I would like to work with as many people as I can to understand, and to try to help, and to make new relationships, and try to help nonprofits as well as ourselves kind of reinvent during these times until things get back to whatever is going to be our new normal. So thank you for having me. I would love to hear what everyone has to say, and learn from all of you, and see how companies like myself can help and be a part of this transition.
Thanks so much, AJ. I mean, there were some great ideas right there, and that's a presentation in itself, because I definitely think we need to review how we do things going forward, and any way we can work with our caterers and our event venues to help us get to that next level would be great. So thanks for the information. And again, thanks for sponsoring, and thanks for recognizing the importance of the nonprofit committee and the chamber as a whole. So we're going to get started now. Again, the folks from D'Alessandro are going to have a little something to say at the beginning, but we're really going to take your questions to drive everything. So the way the nonprofit committee works is we meet once a month like this, and we have a presenter who does some kind of educational component. And when we started this a few years ago, Paul and Phil were actually our first speakers. And, I think, even though we've been doing it for 2 years, probably one of our best speakers. And they come with a wealth of experience. over 100 years combined fundraising and nonprofit consulting, experience. So we really appreciate to have them. Paul is the founder of D'Alessandro Consulting. John Corcoran is the president, and Phil is one of their top consultants. So you're going to get a lot of information here from them, and there's no question that they're not going to be able to answer. And I'm going to just turn it over to them, and we can get started. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jeff. We're excited to be here. We've been members of the Chamber for quite some time. Paul actually established D'Alessandro Incorporated over 25 years ago. Been working with nonprofits of all different sizes, from $250,000 budgets up to hundreds of millions of dollars in the budgets. We've worked on campaigns that could have been $500,000, and some campaigns, believe it or not, up to $1 billion. So D'Alessandro, Paul, when he established the firm, realized that there were many different types of nonprofits that need help. The way you or I would get into our car, Paul would jump on a plane, fly across the country. He's actually worked internationally as well. So I'm excited that we could all get together today. And John has known Paul. I guess John and Paul were both originally from New Jersey, met each other many years ago, and have been working together for quite some time. We really want to make this all about you. In one moment, I'm going to turn this over to John, and he's going to kick it off with a few opening comments. He'll pass it off to Paul. But if you click on chat below, as Joe mentioned below, and then click on my name, Philip Rutigliano, we'll be able to field your questions. We want to make this about you and what your concerns are. Our phones have been ringing off the hook. Our nonprofits need help, and that's why we volunteered to be here today, to be of service and to see how we can help you and answer your questions. The topic is whatever you'd like it to be, so please feel free to click on chat, send me your questions, and we'll feed them to the team. John, you want to take a moment and kick us off?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Phil. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Jim, for your leadership. What I'm going to talk about today in general to kick us off is adapting. And a perfect example, a great lead-in. I couldn't have scripted it better, and I promise you we didn't script it, but Jim coming on talking about the willingness of the Meadowlands to be adapting, his vulnerability of saying he wants to help you, but he's looking for your guidance as well. It's a time to come together. It's a perfect example of adapting. Take that example, put it into your business. If you're a board member, put it into your for-profit business. If you're in the nonprofit, adapt it there, because adaptation is going to go across the board. Charles Darwin, and in one of his quotes on the survival of the fittest, said that survival of the fittest has nothing to do with strength, has nothing to do with intelligence, it has nothing to do with your size. It has to do with adaptation and adapting. And we all know that theory, so let's apply it today. So the first thing I just want to bring up is that in this time, a lot of us have no choice. We're shelter at home. Certain businesses are told to be closed. Certain businesses are open. They're allowed to do certain things. Nonprofits fall somewhere in there where most of us are considered essential. So, adaptation is so important because no one's actually shutting us down, but we do have a choice. What I want to say is stay the mission, focus on your mission, embrace your mission. And if you can't, then maybe it is time to shut down, because you only have two choices. Continue with the mission and adapt, or maybe, just shut the doors and say, there's no need for us right now. We don't have the strength. We don't have the excitement about it. We have to get energetic about it and go back to our mission. Tactics and strategies change every day, but the mission shouldn't. So there's two ways to adapt. One is keep the same strategy, change the approach. And the other one is change your strategy with the same approach. So two examples, a school, all schools. Their strategy was, we have to educate kids, the ultimate mission and strategy. The approach was bring them into classrooms, put them on fields, take them on field trips, put them in the theater, put them into laboratories. All of a sudden that was taken away, no choice, taken away. They adapted, let's do it online. If we can't do it online, we'll mail stuff home to people's houses. People can pick stuff up, we'll adapt. The other one is, and one of our clients is a school, and we're working with them, and they've done a great job at adapting. Another one A former client of ours is a program, inner city training and daycare. All of a sudden, they can't do either one. But their mission is serving that inner city population. So they realize that they have a facility where they serve food to the moms, they serve food to the kids. They said, we can turn ourselves into a food processing. So they not only make the food, they distribute food, they gather food, they exchange food, and they really came up on a great program. So they took a totally different strategy, but they used the same approach. They have a building that now they can use for food. The school can't use their building, but they can use Zoom and a platform in Google to be able to teach. So the other thing I want to leave you with before we open up, well, Paul's going to give a couple examples, and then we really want to hear your specifics. But in general, this is something I believe all of us can do, for-profit and nonprofit. We call it the D'Alessandro 4-point plan. We've introduced it to our clients back in the beginning of March, and the ones that have tried it have done a great job at it. And we've even learned from their experience in doing this, because it's unprecedented times, right? So we learn every day. Number one, call up people and ask them, how are you doing? 2, how can we help? 3, this is how we're sticking to the mission, whether we're adapting our strategy or our approach, we're sticking to the mission. These are some examples, these are some stories about how we're living the mission. And then the 4th one is here's how we're connecting people. We have a Facebook chat, we have a weekly get together. We have an exchange for people looking for jobs and people that have jobs, and trying to adapt. I can't say it enough. So getting back to an example with our one of our clients that did this, they started calling people and said, how are you doing? And then people were like, wow, you're just calling to see how I'm doing. 2, how can we help? One person said, hey, you know what? You're a school. I need an electrician to come into my house. My wife will not just let anybody come in, but I need some major work done here or I'm going to have a problem. Maybe one of our alumni is an electrician. I'd feel comfortable with that. They connected them. And let me tell you, if you haven't done this, maybe some of you have, and you have stories you can share, but the people who were so moved by a phone call, they said, I get 300 emails from the charities I've worked with. You didn't call and ask me for money. You called and you asked how I was doing. And when you told me about your mission, I want to give. So people are self-selected. I'm going to leave you with that. The 4 points: how are you doing? How can we help? Here's an update on our mission, and here's how we're connecting you to other people within our stakeholders. Paul, you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. I just want to, I'll be real brief and want to get to the questions, but one of the things that I wanted to do is just be an encouragement to all of you. I've been doing this work for over 33 years now as a fundraiser. It started in 1987 when the market crashed. That was my first week at the University of Notre Dame as a major gift fundraising consultant. We started a $350 million campaign, and several years later we exceeded that goal. But through time, we've seen a lot of things like this. So when I say be an encourager, this is a moment in time, and yes, I realize that it's hard. It's really hard. There's no doubt. But we'll get through this, and I do believe that there's going to be some good things that really come out of this. Some time ago, I was going through something personal, and somebody said, after the end of every storm, there's a rainbow. And that's kind of a philosophy that I live by. But, we've seen, in terms of giving and all that, there's only been 2 times since 1978 that giving hasn't gone up. And that's been 1987 and then 2008, 2009 for the Great Recession. We've gotten through the Persian Gulf War in 1990, the tech crash and the dot-com bubble, 2000 to 2002. We got through 9/11, and I was doing a campaign in New Orleans for Katrina. Now, at all those moments in time, there was this collective, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But at the end, they were all horrible things. But we did recover from them. In some cases, for example, at Katrina, after Katrina, a number of the organizations saw a significant increase in giving over and above what the national average is. And it's the same after 9/11. There's been a lot of nonprofits that have spun out, hundreds of them after 9/11. So I would imagine, and I've seen a number already started spinning out after this virus has started. So just by way of background, we've been there. We've seen stuff like this happen. I know COVID is an exception, just like 9/11. But my encouragement to you all is that be adaptive, as I said, as Jim and John said, but don't think that this is the end, because I believe that some great things are going to be happening coming up. So let's go for some questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Thank you, John. The first question that came in deals with being adaptive, and it says, will nonprofits need to focus on smaller, mid-size events for the short and midterm, and what are some ways to adapt with that? So, Paul, John, take the floor.
So again, it's kind of how you define events. I mean, we're going to redefine things all the time. I spoke to a colleague in Chicago, and there was a major event that's typically done. They did it virtually. I forget what it was called, but they raised $2.5 million, record-setting, more money that they've ever done virtually. So I think in terms of events, we've talked, and you've probably heard the phrase lunch and learns. I think people are going to be apprehensive, at least from the next 6 months, to gather in large groups. So the events are going to have to be tailored down to a much smaller audience. But again, I think virtual is going to be a way that you're going to see a lot of.
Let me just jump in with one example. One of our clients this week shared the success of an event Tuesday night. So we're very current. This is even this week, not even last week. And they had the moms of the group wanted to do a fashion show. It's been successful over the years. It's kind of a who's who, great event, more about the gathering, more about the mission than about the clothing. But they decided to do it virtually. So the people who were going to model, the moms, the kids, the staff, they sent the clothes to their houses. They got comfortable with with wearing them. They kind of paraded around their living room using just their own camera on their iPhone. They still had baskets. They still were able to do their raffle, and people had a great time. And they wound up raising. They didn't hit their goal from last year, but they were only off by 10%. And here's the interesting thing: the majority of the committee said, "Let's just bag it. We can't do it. We can't gather in the place. Let's just bag it." And someone said, "No, let's adapt. I'll take a chance." And the chair said, well, it was the client executive director said, "It's my neck on the line. Let's do it. We'll do it virtually. We'll stay within the law." And everyone had a great time, and people really wanted to contribute. So adapting, you're absolutely right. Maybe it's a smaller event. And like our sponsor talked about, you buy a table, but you just take your table to a restaurant someplace. So be it. Here they took the runway to their living room, and everybody had a laugh and a great time, and a lot of great comments came back from it. So I agree with you still have to have the events. Just get people to give you suggestions and be open to those suggestions. We are creative people.
Thank you, John. Here's a question that's I know we've been asked this before, and the fact that it keeps coming up is important. Can you talk about how this is a great opportunity to get away from the transactional events and move and focus on the individual donors?
So I've spent my life with major gift donors, and I've long been telling our clients that it should be one of your if not the biggest key revenue generator. And so if a lot of nonprofits are kind of too revenue source driven, they'll have events and direct mail, but it's kind of the third rail major gifts. So my advice to everybody is, if you're not into the major gifts piece of it now, start engaging people. John?
Yeah, I think we to use that 4-point plan that we told you about, one client split up. They had 8 people. They kind of deputized them because they said, "Look, you're not asking for money. Can you pick up a phone and call them and say, on behalf of the organization, how are you doing? How can we help? Let me give you an update on what we're doing, and here's how we're connecting." And they were able to take 50 people each. There were 8 of them, so they got to 400 of their top donors. And some of those donors were all the way down to what none of us on this phone would consider major donors, but they still cared about them, and it didn't cost them anything. They can't do the same thing they did every day, but they stayed the mission. And to that question, whoever asked the question, I really appreciate it, because there's never been a better time to go one-on-one with people on Zoom and on phone calls than today. Because when we open up, we're going to be back to events, we're going to be back to mailings, we're going to be back to everything else. But I can tell you on my personal life, my emails have doubled. The good news is I have more time to read them, but my emails have doubled. But I got to tell you, except for calls that are perfunctory and regarding my business, I am not getting calls from friends, family, and from organizations that I donate to, because they're caught up in being caught up. And so I can't stress enough, you will be different. You will stand out uniquely if you just, when you leave it today, the first thing you should do, pick 5 people, call them from your organization, and just ask them how they're doing. You will see a difference, and they will self-select to see, how can I help you?
And just by one quick example, John called somebody, but they did a Zoom call. It was somebody who had indicated maybe a $10,000 gift, and they wound up giving $50,000 based off the phone call, which was unexpected. So we've closed a number of major gifts through Zoom and through phone.
Absolutely. A part B to that would be, Paul, I know we've spoke about this in the past, and then I'll have another question after you do part B. When we look at individual donors versus corporate donors, statistically, roughly, or percentage-wise, what's the difference of individuals giving versus money coming from a foundation or a corporation?
Yeah, I think most people have seen the Giving USA reports, but it's about 85% of the money that's given in this country is coming from individuals. And what we're seeing in talking to our donors right now, because John and I are very, very much engaged with the donors, is there's a redirection of where they're giving the money. So, and this is something that, as you look at your case, it's more towards the poor and those people who have been hurt the most. So I was talking to a major donor in Princeton 2 weeks ago, and he said, look, my wife and I, we sat down, we decided that we're going to give a large sum of money to 7 charities. We wrote checks, and we're redeploying for all those people who are probably hurt the most from the virus. And that's something that I've heard consistently, not just here in this area, but all the way over to California, is we're going to help those people who've been hurt the most. So people, for instance, our schools where the kids' parents got laid off, they can't afford scholarship, for the people who are working. So that's kind of something that we're seeing more of.
Thank you, Paul. I heard a great example. Somebody had pledged to give a certain amount of money to a nonprofit. And because of the crisis that we're going on now, they asked them to forego their pledge this year, extend their pledge to adding another year onto it, and take their pledge amount this year and give it so that the monies can be used to assist with the organization, given the fact that we're going through this crisis right now. So I thought that was a great example of working with an existing donor and getting him to focus on what's the trouble that's going on now, given everybody's budget. We have another question that came in that said, and in the administration staff of Obama, somebody once said, never allow a good crisis to go to waste. It's an opportunity to do some things you once thought were impossible. And the question is, what opportunities for nonprofits and fundraisers do you see emerging from this crisis?
Well, let me take a stab at that. The biggest opportunity is if you can demonstrate with enthusiasm to your constituency, to your stakeholders, how well you did during the crisis, how you reached out to them, how you stayed connected. What did Jim say at the beginning? Information is key. We need to have information about COVID. We need to have information about the law. We need information about resources, but also our board members and our donors need information from us. And the more information, the more we stay connected. Here's the greatest opportunity, I believe, is when we come out of it, people are going to have new priorities. There are people who are out 4 nights a week that are going to make a decision that they're only going to be out 2 nights a week because they've enjoyed being home with their family for 7 nights, and they're just going to adjust. They're not going to stay home 7 nights, but they're going to adjust because their priorities are different. And I believe that donors, especially the major donors who spread their money around, they're going to make choices. And the people who stayed connected, the people who shared vision and mission, the people who gave who gave information, at the end of the line, they're going to turn to their business partner or their spouse and say, hey, you know what? Looking at this giving, we made a big impact during COVID. COVID's a little bit behind us. We hope it doesn't relapse, but we're kind of back. Let's reshuffle the deck. And through the other crises, we've seen organizations that were number 50 on someone's priority, and they moved right up into the top 10. And it only happens through communication, staying in touch, caring about them, and asking how they're doing, and staying connected in that way. That adaptation will make the greatest opportunity for you following the crisis.
And just, additionally, just remember, all nonprofits are businesses. So revenue is critical, and it's, can you think differently about what your revenue streams are going to be? I remember and it's not a nonprofit story, but I had a friend who had a restaurant in Florida, and of course he got destroyed because of 2008, 2009, but he decided to start selling more wine in his store. And now he's probably one of the top wine sellers in Northeast Florida, but he adapted his business enough, kept his branding, and he's doing well. So, I just think that you're going to have all nonprofits are going to have to take a hard look at what they're doing, how can they do things differently, and do they even need to change some of the things that they're doing, not in terms of fundraising, but in terms of service.
Thank you, Paul. Hey, Paul, here's a question for you. Will Zoom and other platforms cause challenges in our face-to-face contact with donors?
I think that, there's a lot of, as fundraisers, John and I have always been out to do face-to-face meetings. So I think that that's going to be another gatekeeper, if you will, which is, you don't need to come see me. I've gotten comfortable with Zoom. Why don't we do that? We're always going to try and do face-to-face meetings. I think it's just going to be another option for people. But if you can do the face-to-face, I think it's important. There's just something special about having that connectivity, looking somebody directly in the eye. I find Zoom to be, and I'm sure a lot of you have, if you're doing 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a day, kind of exhausting because of the focus that you have to give. But there's nothing like, watching body movement and eye contact.
John, I have a question for you, unless you want to comment on what Paul just said.
Nope, he handled it.
Okay, great. An organization is not shut down, but some employees have been furloughed, some have been laid off. How do they decide now, based on their staffing, who stays and who goes?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it's a moving target because every day regulations change and funding changes, and Congress is putting out stimulus packages and then pulling it back and then redefining and adding questions and caveats. And so it becomes very difficult, and that's certainly not easy. But I would say that the best advice that a leader has to do, and I think we've got some nice leaders on this call today in your own organization, and I'm sure that you're already doing it. But my simple answer to that would be, who are the people that are going to most adapt? Who are the people that are going to have the best attitude? Because let's face it, none of us knew anything about what we do now until someone taught it to us. We were not born with it. And a perfect example, and a shameless plug to my friend Paul, but I'm happy that he started this company 25 years ago because, like they say with the Hair Club for Men, today I'm Paul's partner, but he was one of my mentors. And so I didn't know anything about fundraising until I learned from my mentors how to do it, because my boss said at the hospital, I want you to leave the executive suite and become the president of the hospital foundation, because we're firing the foundation president and I need somebody in there. Just do it for 3 months and let's see what happens. Well, I had no experience. And here now, over 20 years later, I'm enjoying it. And it was the greatest decision I didn't make in my career. Someone else made it for me, but I adapted. So I think that we want somebody who can adapt. They picked me not because I was the smartest and not because I was the strongest, not because I was there the longest, but he said, you're an adapting kind of guy, so you take over the foundation, see what happens. Could have been a 3-month stint and I would have helped them hire somebody else, but it didn't. So if I were you, I would look and say, who can do the most things? Who's willing to stay on Friday night? Who says you can call me at night if you have a problem? Who says I'm available on the weekend? We're really, I want to be available to you. You know, and let's use Jim as an example. Hey, Jim, you know, I love working with you. You need me on Sunday? I'll get back to you. We you know, you never bother me. We're in crisis time. I want to be adaptable. That's the kind of person you want to have in your organization. And certainly you have to look at the particular skills. So in a school, if your general maintenance director is your most cooperative person, they can't be teaching history tomorrow. So let's be practical. But within the teachers, who are the ones you're going to ask to step up to do the assemblies? Who are the ones who are going to step up to do some of the other extracurricular activities that you weren't doing in person, but now you need somebody to do it in Zoom? You're probably going to reach out to the most adaptable.
The question that comes in is right around the corner. It's what will be the best way to prep for the fall? So we're still in spring. Summer's right around the corner. Hopefully, we had that 80-degree weather last weekend. And but how do we prep for the fall? For the fall, it's coming a few months ahead.
So you know, one of the things that I tell people, right, because it's almost going to be like a floodgate of activity that's open up. So the first thing is, it might sound funny, but is to rest, because it's going to be a doubling up of all sorts of activities. Second thing is, I would say, kind of act now, check facilities, pay attention to events. You know, graduations got pushed into August for some colleges. The Indy 500s moved into August. We don't know if we're going to have football seasons. The Masters got moved. And so some people are going to want to get back into some of the things that they missed, but also a lot of the nonprofits are going to add what they stalled on April and May, and they're moving it into September when gala season is happening, when it's going to be a total bunch of activity. So also, you know, like we talked about earlier, smaller venues, lunch and learns. You know, even we have one client that's sending a bottle of wine out to 10 major gift donors, and they're going to have a Zoom meeting and kind of a happy hour and talk about the nonprofit over a bottle of wine. I think too that summer is going to be different. You know, we're used to everyone going away on vacation in the summer. A lot of people going to Europe. I think what we've said in the past is a lot of donors aren't going to be around. I think you're going to see a lot more donors around this summer, and they're going to be ready to work because they feel stalled and they're going to get caught up. So don't make any assumptions like that the year, like things are going to be as they were last year, because everything's going to be different because the calendar's way off. But you've got to check your calendars because there's going to be a lot of conflict with other nonprofits and a lot of other activities that were missed in the spring.
Yeah, Paul, can I just I want to add on to a comment, if I may, on that. With you just hit on it perfectly. You know, the end of the year. You know, we're all stretching out our events and moving them from March, April, May, and June into September, October, November. You really can't do much in December with holidays, although it might be different this year. But I'm thinking about how do I eliminate some of our events and how do I make up for, you know, in my particular case with the chamber, a good portion of our operating revenue comes from a couple of our fundraisers just to operate, just to pay for operations and staff and the good things that we do. And so how would I replace that? But more importantly, we're going to be stepping on each other for events, right? You know, we've moved our golf outing, which I'm not even sure we're still going to be able to do, from June into August. And there's already 3 golf outings of other organizations on the same day. And so ultimately, despite the fact that we're already thinking about smaller events, they may be even smaller than that because we're going to be doing things on the same days of other organizations. And so it really does behoove us all to think about how we would do those events and how would we replace the giving and or the revenue so that doesn't become a lesson in futility.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, really good point, Jim, and a good lesson for all of us, because as I said before, I've heard some people that were feeling very overcommitted and overwhelmed prior to 8 weeks ago. And right now, they said, as frustrated as they are, one thing they're feeling is that they're really enjoying kind of staying home. One guy said he was 3 weeks of the month on planes going around. He loves his job. He loves going on planes, but he's kind of really loving being home. So if we're gonna put more events into the fall on and more conflict, and people are, and especially the people that have the money, that travel, that have successful businesses, are going to say, you know what, I'm not going to be out 4 nights a week anymore. Now they're cutting their time in half, and we're adding twice as much. So that's a great insight. I will say this, because all we can really do is what can we do today, right? But one statement I would ask everybody to get out of their vocabulary, one statement out of your vocabulary completely is, oh, we can't do that. Because that's different than we've always done it that way. That's the different thing, but we can't do that. What I would say is maybe you can, but at least entertain the comment about, hey, how about this? At least entertainment, throw it around, maybe something, a variation of it will come out. But somebody gave me an idea the other day that they're doing. They had not a huge money raiser, but they raised thousands of dollars on a foul shooting contest. They capitalized on kids love to come to do foul shooting. They raised money. Kids came to the gym. They had all kinds of stuff. They're still having this foul shooting contest, and here's how they're doing it. People are signing up. They're getting their sponsors. They're paying their small fee to get in. The parents are paying it, obviously, for the charity, and they're sending a representative around that's going to stand 20 feet away with a camera, and they're going to film them in their driveway taking foul shots, or in a neighbor's driveway or a backyard or whatever. They're still having this contest, and they're still raising money. They're not going to wait till the gyms are open. They're just seizing the moment right now, and everyone's getting a kick out of it. And with the judges being able to see live feed of FaceTime and take a picture, people can't cheat. The other thing is, if you're doing like a walk, this is the springtime coming, we're already here, but if you were having a walk, you could tell people to still do the walk, still get your sponsors, and then put them on the honor system. They walk and they say, I walked, and they can tell everybody what route they take. If we can't put 1,000 people on the same street, we can put 1,000 people on 1,000 different streets. And then when it starts to relax, if they let 10 people gather in a group on June 6th, then maybe if your run or walk was going to be in June or July, then you say, we're going to do it, but we're going to put 10 people at a time. And that goes back to the comment about a table of 10. Now you do it in cohorts of 10. So we have to be adaptable. I know I'm beating the dead horse of adaptability, but it's so true. Just don't ask the question, or don't make the statement, oh, we can't do that, because maybe we can.
Another question, event related. Somebody has a gala planned for early November. Should they continue to plan for that gala, or should they postpone it and consider doing it virtually?
I wouldn't cancel it. I just think that, what I always tell people is, put yourself in the shoes of the donor. So if you got invited to something in November, would you be thinking about going? Are you going to ask, are people going to be asking how many people are going to be attending and what's going to be the spread out in the table? It might be somewhat of a combination, and that's what John and I have been talking about, because we've gotten so accustomed to Zoom meetings. Some people might say, well, I can't go, but can I join in on Zoom? And so unless there's a return of COVID, which, some people might say happened, I would continue on as if, things are going to get back to normal, but with the understanding that it's probably not going to be at the numbers that you had last year. But I would not cancel it. I mean, there are people right now who have canceled events in July, and they kind of have a regret, and these are major gift functions, that they did so, because people are going to start moving around a little bit more in July, or a lot more.
Yeah, one example, going back to history, at 9/11, I was working for a hospital at the time, as the president of the foundation. We had our big gala in the fall, and there were 2 other hospitals in the county that had their galas in the fall, and we always spoke like the next day. So we were all in October, so in November we all got on a call and said, what's your date going to be? Because the last thing we wanted was to have our dates the same. So all three of us had our gala in October, and September 11th came. And then everybody was scrambling. Boards were saying, what are we going to do? And one of the hospitals just said, we can't have a gala at a time like this. And they just put the fork in it and killed it. Canceled everything, band, venue, whatever. The other two hospitals, not in cahoots, we weren't talking to each other, but our boards and our executives said, let's do it. We'll start out with God Bless America. We'll have a moment of silence, but we'll say we can't let events stop the mission because we stayed focused to the mission. We still have a hospital to run. If we shut down the hospital, we shut down the gala. But the board agreed that if we're going to keep the hospital open, we have to keep the gala open. We had an unbelievable attendance. We had people sign up late that were not planning on coming originally. The two hospitals afterwards compared notes, more revenue, more feeling good about the mission of the hospital. And the other one, actually a couple of people lost their jobs over it. So it was a bad decision. So I agree with Paul. You have to have a plan B and a plan C and the plan D in today's time, but I wouldn't cancel yet. And you know, chances are if you have to cancel, it'll be somebody else make the decision for you. The situation will make the decision. You won't have to do it. Here, there was nothing wrong with having a gala except that someone was afraid that they might be judged with how can you have dancing when people lost their lives in 9/11. And the other hospital said, how can we leave this money on the table when we have a hospital to serve the underprivileged? And this is where we get most of our charity money from. We have to have our gala.
Yeah, just two quick points. Jim, you know, you asked about replacing it. I look at those things and say, you know, what is it? Really, it's all about, you do these things for community and for revenue. And I think those people who support the chamber will understand that, so they'll continue to support it for the revenue to keep things going. And so I think that's just an important thing to remember. And as far as the events, if you don't do an event, somebody's going to fill that gap in the place, because you got to remember, everybody's looking to do the same thing. So if you pull out, then somebody's going to stand in the gap. So with a lot of campaigns that we've done, especially in these times of crisis, people have taken themselves out of the game. They don't ask donors for money. They don't do events. And they take themselves out of the play. And then somebody else steps up and gets the money that you could have gotten because you made a decision for the donor that they wouldn't have necessarily made.
Thank you. We're approaching 11 o'clock. Joe said we can go a little bit longer. We still have questions coming in. One of the questions we asked at the onset was, how do we generate energy and unclutter? There's a lot of concern about, as Jim pointed out, moving events. Other questions we had, moving events, things getting busy in the fall. We had another question come in about, hey, what happens when we have a relapse, as the administration has talked about, in the fall, and this comes back again? But right now, so it's a kind of a two-part question. How do we generate energy today and unclutter? And part two would be the question that was posed was, what do we do about the future and a relapse of the virus?
So let me just the energy and unclutter is we have to look at you got to make a list, put a line down the middle, and on the left-hand side of the page put the things that you can't do anything about. And when you can't do anything about it, then don't even focus on it. So for us to sit there and lament the fact that we can't go and get our hair cut and we can't go out to a restaurant, it's wasted energy. So we can't do it, put it on the left side. On the right side, what can you do? And it's really one step at a time, one thing. If you wake up in the morning and you just think of one thing you're grateful for, it'll put you in a whole lot better mood than if you wake up in the morning and think of one thing you're frustrated about. So it's really about that one step, and to use, AA has a great philosophy of one step at a time, one day at a time. We need to go back to that basic and say, today I'm going to make one phone call to one donor and ask them how they're doing. Maybe putting a list of 50 together is like, I can't do that, and your narrative, if you believe in your mission, your narrative will come. That has to be clear. But I would say to unclutter is get off the table all the things you can't do anything about and only take one step toward what you can. As far as the second question, Phil, was just repeat it again.
The second question was in terms of there's the administration's talking about there's going to be a relapse. And once we start getting into phases and we're out in the community, this virus is going to spike again and come back.
Well, here's what, you know, what my take is on that, and coming out of the medical profession and still dealing with healthcare clients, what they're saying now is that with some of the things put in place with social distancing and awareness, you got to remember on March 1st, we had no awareness at all. And so what we did on March 1st could have caused, no, not could have, let me rephrase that, definitely caused the pandemic, because not having any idea, we were doing things that if we only knew, we would have even taken a small precaution. If I didn't wear a mask, I wouldn't come that close to you. If I really was sick, I would stay home on my own, but we didn't know anything. So what they're saying is the awareness and the gradual opening, we're not going to go from stay at home to put 50,000 people in Giant Stadium. That's not going to happen. There's going to be a small percentage of people that are going to be allowed into the stadium, even when we do it. So what the experts are saying is our first round of potential, and let me say potential relapse, is going to come before we open up the floodgates. And so the hospitals will be able to handle that relapse from that standpoint, and we will have adapted to a level of normalcy, or a new normal, or the next normal, to where the relapse is not going to create a pandemic and create the hardship it fell on us. We've already been through that. And so the only way that would really cripple us again is if they said, open up the floodgates, put 1,000 people into a gala, and then we get a relapse. Oh, that could be detrimental, but that's not happening. We can all be assured we're not going back to the 1,000-person gala. There's one venue in Missouri that's opening up a concert. They're supposedly going to be maybe the first music concert in America to come back. 1,100 seat theater, 200 seats being sold, temperature being taken as you walk in, masks mandatory on arrival and in its entirety. If you take the mask off, they're throwing you out. Nobody's going to get any kind of COVID under those circumstances, but very, very disciplined, very, very limited, but a small step back toward being able to go to a venue and hear live music for the first time.
Thank you, John. We have a few more questions. I want to make note that when this meeting does end, if something's like a Monday morning quarterback looking at the tapes from Sunday's game, something's going to strike you. So if you have a question, you can send it to D'Alessandro at hello, D'AlessandroInc.com, and we will get back to you and field the questions that come to you after the meeting ends. One of the questions we have, Paul, I'll throw this at you. John just alluded to it, but what do you think the future of fundraising looks like? You know, beyond the summer and the fall, what does it hold? What does the future hold for us?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things going on in fundraising right now, and it has to do a lot with, you know, because I live in the world of major donors, is technology is going to play an even greater place, especially artificial intelligence. You know, we're looking at things about how impact investing is affecting nonprofits. And I think, you know, some of how people in the nonprofit sector are compensated. I think you're going to see some more creativity in terms of attracting and retaining people coming in there. And also, I think what happens in times like this too, we're going to see more collaborations and more mergers of nonprofits. You know, sometimes you've probably heard it said that there's far too many nonprofits out there, and there's over 1.6 million nonprofits, and you have people out there, everybody's fundraising for something. So there has to be some sort of consolidation in the space. And I just want to add, I saw the comments on the cancer thing, and from Dan and from Sarah, and I just want to say too, yes, what you're doing is critical. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, so I perfectly understand the importance of what you're doing, but I think that it's not so much the events, it's how you're raising money. And major institutions like MS and cancer and stuff are heavily event driven. So you're going to have to take a hard look at your models of fundraising and really get more into the individual fundraising. I think people will still give to those things, especially now, given what's going on in the health sector.
Thank you, Paul. John, I'll throw this question your way. It was one of the questions we came up with when we were putting this together. In regards to the boards, what can, and we coach a lot of boards in the nonprofit area, working with them hand in hand. What can the boards do to help support their organizations?
What the boards can do is say yes. That's the best thing that a board member can do, is say yes. And unfortunately, that puts the burden on the executive director, the president, the development director, program director, whatever your title is, fill in the blank. But it really, in times like this, it's up to us to give information and to ask for help. If someone doesn't want help, help can't help you. It's meaningless. And board members at this time, unless you've got that 1 in 100, they're looking for you to say, how can I help? And some of them may even call you and say, how can I help? But as far as board members' benefit to you, they can get on the phone and call 10 people. As a representative, I'm doing that for one of the executive director, and I spoke yesterday for a charity that I'm on their board, and I'm making 10 calls for him this week. And I'm going to call people. I'm going to say, how you doing? You know, how can we help? Here's what we're doing with our mission, and here's how we can help connect those of us that are stakeholders. And as a board member, I can do that. He's not asking me for ask for money. I mean, I don't want to do that. And even as a fundraiser, I don't want to ask for money. None of us want to ask. We know we have to. And so we become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Board members will say yes, but only if we ask them. And, you know, when I got into fundraising and back in the day, and I went to my first conference, I knew nothing, guys. I didn't know what an ask was, and I didn't know what a case for support was. And every one of you know what that is. And I'm like, what do you mean an ask? I come out of sales and marketing and public relations. To me, it was a presentation. That's when I found out an ask is when you ask for money. Oh, that's like asking for the order. I get it. Okay. They said to me, John, there's only 2 things you have to know. And they said, why do people give? And I gave them all these reasons. It's mission driven or whatever. He says, no, people only give because they're asked. And then he said, the other thing is people give to people. And so if a person is enthusiastic about the mission, people will connect first to the person, and that person will lead them to the mission. And so Jim Kirkus is a perfect example. I know that the Meadowlands Chamber does not look the way it looks today when Jim came on board. That's not an indictment to the people who went behind him, because the person before him adapted, and the person before him and the person before her and him and everybody else. But what Jim is saying to us today is saying, I'm welcoming your help. If you have an idea, you come to me. So as a leader, Jim brought the Meadowlands to where it is today, and it did not look like that. And so we all need to go back at the beginning. And when you had no board members, what did you do to attract board members? When you had to switch board members out to fit your style. When you came on board, some board members said, you know what, Phil, it's not personal, but maybe it's time for me to get out. It's a transition. What did you do to get that board member? Go back to the basics and say, what did I do when I started this job? What did I do when I founded this organization? When I went for the American X Corporation, and now I went to the American Cancer Foundation, what did I do to put my thumbprint on there? That's what I need to do today, and treat it as something new. Draw from your experience and then go forward. But don't wait for the board members to call you. Keep them informed. Jim said the other day, information. I mean, not the other day. It sounds like the other day, but it was just at the beginning of this call. Give them information. Ask for their help. Ask for their advice. Ask for their input, and they will help you tie the bow on top of a good idea.
Thanks, John. It's another question. It's almost 2-part. It could be the same. It could be 2 different questions. How do we get ready to pivot to the new normal? And part B of that would be, how important is technology in the work that we're doing in the nonprofit arena?
I know we're short on time, Phil. I want to be mindful of that. But, you know, to pivot, you know, what I tell people, and you've heard me say it, is get your house in order. It's tighten your calendars up. You know, you heard what Jim said, and he jumped off, but he's got a 3-month plan, a 6-month plan. And I really think you just need to pay attention to everything else that's going on. I think you're going to need to adjust your goals. You know, for our clients and our fundraisers, we talk about what are the metrics. You know, how many people are you seeing? How many people are you soliciting? How much money are you trying to raise? You know, on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis. We know that in a college scenario, most of you are